At my sister's wedding, she grabbed the mic and cackled. This one's for the sister who owes me $2,438 and still shows up in Gucci. Gasps filled the room as a spotlight hit me. Care to explain? My uncle asked, pulling up a projector with my bank statements. Everyone watched. From the moment Sybil got engaged, I knew something dramatic would unfold. My younger sister has always had a flair for performance, the kind that borders on manipulation. We've always had a complicated relationship, but things began spiraling 2 years ago when I loaned her $2,438 during a time she claimed to be on the verge of eviction. I gave it to her quietly, without a second thought. That's what family does, or so I told myself. She promised to pay it back by the end of the month. That was in November 2021. I waited. And waited. I followed up a few times, casually at first. Then more directly. She brushed me off with excuses that grew thinner and more absurd as time passed. It became a point of tension. I brought it up during a quiet dinner at our mother's place last spring. I still remember how she rolled her eyes and said, "Are you seriously still holding on to that? It wasn't even that much. I thought I already paid you." That comment stuck with me like a splinter. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was the disregard, how easily she twisted the narrative, how quick she was to gaslight me in front of family. Fast forward to her wedding day. I hadn't wanted to go, honestly. But family loyalty dies hard, and I convinced myself it was better to show up and keep the peace. Besides, I had bought the dress a discounted, gently used Gucci gown I found online. It made me feel good, for once. I didn't wear it to provoke. I wore it because I liked how I felt in it. The ceremony was tasteful. Beautiful, even. White peonies. A vineyard backdrop. Sybil, of course, looked stunning. Picture perfect. She always is. The guests were halfway through their drinks, nibbling on canapes under a string of golden fairy lights when Sybil grabbed the mic for a surprise speech. Her voice rang out sweet and syrupy with a hint of something sharper underneath. This one's for the sister who owes me $2,438 and still shows up in Gucci. There was a pause, the kind of silence that chokes a room. Then awkward chuckles, unsure of whether to laugh or not. I sat frozen, my champagne glass halfway to my lips. And then came the spotlight. Yes, an actual spotlight, the kind DJs bring for dance floors and dramatic bridal entrances. It landed squarely on me. I was too stunned to move. But it got worse. My Uncle Brett, the family's eccentric tech guru who treats every gathering like a chance to unveil a slideshow, wheeled out a portable projector screen. A literal screen. "Since it's already out there," he said, queuing up a slide, "let's have some transparency." The screen lit up with what was unmistakably a screenshot of my bank statement. My name. My account, mostly redacted. A highlighted transaction, outgoing transfer to Sybil R. Calloway, $2,438. People gasped. My mother's face turned pale. My cousin Margot audibly muttered, "What the heck?" That was the moment I stopped caring about appearances. Something in me clicked. It wasn't rage, exactly. It was a deep, slow-burning clarity. I stood up, not rushed or frantic, just steady. My heels clicked lightly against the stone floor as I walked toward the mic. "I didn't owe Sybil anything," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to cut through the silence. 2 years ago, she came to me crying. Said she needed help. I had just finalized my divorce. I was broke emotionally and financially. But I still sent her the money. People were watching me. Not like a scene at a wedding anymore, this was a tribunal. I followed up. She brushed it off. Said she thought she already paid me. For a while, I let it go because I didn't want to cause drama. But clearly, I was the only one trying to avoid drama. I turned slightly towards Sybil, whose face was unreadable, some fusion of panic and smugness still fighting for dominance. As for Gucci? I let out a short laugh. That was a gift to myself. Because after waiting 2 years, I finally accepted that the money wasn't coming back. So I figured, might as well look good while I'm being lied about. The room was dead silent. I handed the mic back and returned to my table, heart pounding but my hands oddly steady. Uncle Brett looked awkward. He quietly unplugged the projector. The remainder of the evening was a blur. People approached me and whispered things like "good for you" and "about time someone said it." Sybil kept her distance, glued to Mason, her new husband, who looked more confused than supportive. What I didn't expect came later. Mason reached out to me privately. Not angrily. Not defensively. He said he had no idea about the loan, no clue about her financial history. That wasn't the only loan she'd taken from people in the family, apparently. He didn't say much more, just that he was processing things. The Monday after the wedding, I was back at my desk at the credit union. Back to spreadsheets, onboarding emails, and the sound of the copy machine spitting out forms no one read. It was comforting in a way. The quiet hum of normalcy. But even there, Sybil's wedding lingered. People talk. Family talk more. By Tuesday, I'd heard from Aunt Rowena, on my dad's side, who barely likes Sybil to begin with, and cousin Leon, who never calls unless something blows up. Word was spreading. Some were scandalized. Others, oddly proud. My mom called me that night. She didn't know what to say, and I didn't press her. I could hear the torn loyalty in her voice, and I let her off the hook. I didn't need her to pick sides, not yet, at least. "She's your sister," Mom said, finally. And she was embarrassed. I exhaled into the phone. So was I, Mom. But I didn't embarrass her. She did that all on her own. There was silence, followed by a week I know. Later that week, I got the message. It came at 1:03 a.m. while I was in bed reading. I remember because I stared at the screen for a full minute before opening it. "Sybil, are you proud of yourself?" That was it. No, hey. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just those 6 words. I didn't respond. The next morning, I got another. "Sybil, you knew this would ruin the night. You didn't have to say anything. You're vindictive." Again, I left it alone. I wasn't going to get into a text war with someone who once cried because a waitress forgot her extra side of avocado. The messages stopped after that. But then came the email. From Mason. A short, polite, awkward note. He thanked me. Said he'd never seen Sybil that way before. Admitted he didn't know about any of her financial behavior, his words. He asked if I had records. I did. I forwarded the wire transfer receipt, the dated texts where she acknowledged the loan, and a screen capture of my planner entry, the one where I scribbled "loan to Sybil, $2,438, 11:20 seconds. I never heard back from him after that. 2 weeks passed. Life slid back into its usual patterns. I went to work, watered my ferns, and did yoga every Sunday with friends. Still, I felt restless. Then, like fate dialing in for round 2, I got a call from Human Resources. Not from my own office, from the regional office in Charlotte. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Elena, part of a small consulting team working with new fintech startups on partnerships. She asked if I had time to meet about a company we were onboarding, something about digital integrations and payroll optimization. I said sure. When I showed up for the meeting in Charlotte, I wasn't expecting to see Mason in the glass-walled conference room. He looked like he'd aged a year in 2 weeks. His smile was polite, his handshake stiff. He didn't bring up the wedding. Neither did I. The meeting was boring, really. Talk of APIs, secure transfer protocols, third-party compliance. But when it ended and people filtered out, Mason stayed behind. "I didn't know she took money from you," he said quietly. "I didn't know she did that to other people either. My brother. Her old roommate. Even at her last job, apparently she left with a company credit card. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I don't know what I'm doing yet, he added. But I wanted to say thank you. You weren't being petty. You were just done. That word hit me. Done. Not angry. Not vindictive. Done. A few days later, Margot and I were having wine on my porch. She brought up Sybil's wedding again. You know she's trying to spin it like you ambushed her, right? She said. Of course she is, I replied. It's the only way she can survive the shame, by pretending I'm the villain. But it's not working. People talk. She's not as slick as she thinks. Margot swirled her wine and gave me a sly look. You should be proud, Nola. You made her face something she's been running from for years. I didn't say it out loud, but I was. Not in a gloating, smug way. But in a way that felt settled. Like I'd finally learned that speaking up, even when it's messy, even when it makes people squirm, is worth it. I never wanted revenge. I wanted the truth out there. And I wanted peace. But if I got both? Well, that was just a bonus. About 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a glittery gold envelope, sealed with wax Sybil's signature drama. Tucked inside was a thank you card printed with a stock image of a champagne glass. The message read, "Thanks for making my wedding unforgettable. Enjoy your moment. Sybil." There was no money. No apology. Just glitter that spilled all over my rug and the unmistakable scent of narcissism. I laughed. It wasn't even a bitter laugh anymore. Just resignation. She wasn't going to change. People like Sybil never really do. When they're confronted, they don't reflect, they retaliate, or play the victim. And if they can't do either, they pretend nothing happened. I didn't text her. I didn't call. But I kept the card, not for nostalgia, but as a reminder of why I'd drawn my line in the sand. Around that time, things started changing with the rest of the family. Aunt Rowena invited me to brunch for the first time in years. My cousin Jonah, who once idolized Sybil like she was a walking Vogue cover, texted me a meme about emotional vampires and said, "Just saw this and thought of our girl nail polish." Even Mom began to soften. At first, she had been caught between two daughters, and the guilt gnawed at her. But now, she started asking more questions. Did Sybil really borrow money from other people too? She asked one Sunday as we prepped a peach cobbler together. She did, I said, carefully slicing the fruit. You know how she is. It's always someone else's fault. Always someone else's job to fix it. Mom sighed. I used to think that was just youth. But she's 33. That's not youth anymore. That's a choice. It was the first time I heard Mom speak that plainly about Sybil. That afternoon, after the cobbler had baked and the dishes were done, she surprised me again. I saw the dress, she said. The Gucci one. I tensed, waiting. You looked beautiful. Like yourself again. I blinked. Thanks, Mom. And that was it. No awkward apology for not backing me at the wedding. No long speech. Just acknowledgement. Real, raw, and enough. Later that month, I heard through the grapevine that Mason had temporarily moved out. Sybil wasn't talking about it, but Margot's sister knew someone who lived in Mason's building, and Mason had been seen hauling boxes out of his apartment alone. No moving van, she said. Just him and his brother and a lot of Tupperware bins. I didn't rejoice. Not exactly. But I did feel a strange sense of poetic rhythm. She had used spectacle to shame me in front of everyone. But in doing so, she'd exposed her own foundation, one built on entitlement, not honesty. By November, I'd started therapy again. Not because of Sybil, at least not only because of her, but because something in me had shifted. Speaking up at that wedding wasn't just about calling her out. It was about claiming space I'd spent years shrinking away from. My therapist, Claudia, was a gentle woman in her 50s with a calm voice and a patient, piercing gaze. I told her everything about the loan, the wedding, the spotlight, the mic, the glitter-filled envelope. She listened, nodded, and finally said something that landed so squarely in my gut, I still think about it months later. Sometimes, when you grow up in a system that rewards silence, telling the truth feels like violence. That line lived with me. It followed me into meetings, family dinners, and grocery aisles. It reminded me why I hadn't backed down, why I'd taken the mic. As the holidays approached, the usual group chats buzzed with plans. Someone floated the idea of hosting Christmas at Mom's. Another suggested we all chip in for a catered dinner this time. Sybil hadn't responded in the chat. At all. It wasn't like her. Normally, she'd have a color scheme picked out by mid-November and a Google Doc full of assignments. I'll do cocktails and ambience, Nola can bring something, beige. But this time, nothing. Eventually, someone asked outright, is Sybil coming? No one responded for a long time. Finally, Mom typed, she's taking some space. Let's just plan around that. Not one person objected. And in a strange way, that silence, the absence of her presence, felt louder than anything else. For the first time in years, it felt like the family wasn't contorting itself to orbit around her mood. For the first time, I didn't feel like the odd one out. As December rolled in, Asheville settled into its quiet winter rhythm. The Blue Ridge Mountains turned frosted at the peaks, and the downtown storefronts filled their windows with twinkle lights and cinnamon-scented candles. I always loved this time of year, but this time, it felt different. Lighter. Christmas morning was quiet. Peaceful, even. We gathered at Mom's place, just immediate family and a few cousins. There were gifts and pancakes and coffee mugs that said things like F.A. La La Latte and Resting Grinch Face. No glitter explosive. No mic grabs. No tension humming just beneath the surface. It was, frankly, the best holiday I'd had in years. And then, on New Year's Eve, Sybil finally called. Not texted. Not emailed. Called. I didn't answer the first time. I was sitting on the couch in pajamas, watching fireworks out the window and sipping hot cider, genuinely unsure if I had it in me to open that door again. But the next day, I picked it up. Her voice was flat, almost unrecognizable. I didn't know he was going to leave, she said. There was no preamble. No greeting. Mason? I asked. She didn't answer. I waited. Then, he said I embarrassed myself. Said I humiliated you. And myself. He said it was a red flag. I didn't say anything. Because what was there to say? She sighed, long and shaky. I don't know what I was thinking. I was mad at you for not letting it go. For making me feel guilty. And instead of just owning it, I made it a joke. Another pause. I could hear her breathing heavily and unevenly. I guess I just wanted to say sorry. And she waited. Like she actually meant it. I looked out the window. The streets were quiet. A light snow was falling just enough to dust the rooftops. I believe you're sorry, I said finally. But that doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. She was quiet for a while. I know. I'm glad you said it. And I hope you do something with it. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I needed you to see how far it went. How hurtful it was. Not just the loan, but the way you made me the punchline in front of everyone. She didn't interrupt. I've spent too long shrinking myself so you could shine, I said. I'm not doing that anymore. When she finally responded, her voice was almost a whisper. Okay. And that was it. No dramatic tears. No attempt to spin it. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Weeks passed. She didn't text after that. Didn't email. She posted less on Instagram, no filtered selfies or aesthetic brunch shots. No cryptic quotes about loyalty or betrayal. It was like the storm had passed, and the sky had gone oddly still. And me? I kept going. I redecorated my guest room into a reading space. Got back into painting. Started walking in the mornings before work with a neighbor who had just gone through a divorce of her own. We talked about everything and nothing: sunrises, soup recipes, podcasts, the messiness of healing. In February, I got a handwritten card in the mail. Sybil again. This time, it was simple. No glitter. No barbs. Just a short message: still working on myself. I know I lost your trust. I hope one day I can earn it back. If not, I understand. Thank you for telling the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. I didn't write back. But I smiled. Because that was enough. Not for reconciliation, not yet. But for peace. And maybe, after everything, that was the best kind of revenge. Not silence. Not vengeance. But boundaries. And freedom.